Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast, Uncorking the Issues, where we pour clarity into Temecula Valley politics. This podcast discusses political and civic issues. The views expressed are solely those of the host and guests and do not represent any political party, campaign, school district, or government entity. I'm your host, Grapevine, and today's episode is called Confidence, Access, and the Ballot. We're taking a deeper look at a conversation that keeps surfacing across Temecula Valley, at public meetings, in community groups, and online. We're talking about election confidence here in Riverside County. And to really understand it, we need to connect three pieces that are shaping this discussion locally. The citizen group known as the Riverside County Election Integrity Team, the broader debate between voter fraud and voter suppression, and how a statewide measure like California Proposition 50 enters the conversation here in Temecula. Because these aren't separate issues. They are threads in the same story about what people believe the biggest threat to democracy is. Let's start with REIT. The Riverside County Election Integrity Team is a volunteer citizen group that has been speaking regularly at Board of Supervisors meetings and local civic gatherings. Members say their goal is transparency and accountability in how elections are conducted and audited. Some of the individuals who have publicly spoken as part of REIT include Greg Langworthy, Sharon Neal, and Cindy Allen. They've presented their own reviews of election data, raised concerns about ballot reconciliation, and asked for greater access to audit information. From their perspective, they are doing what engaged citizens should do, asking questions about how public systems work. Their central message is this: if residents cannot clearly see and understand how ballots are counted and verified, trust erodes. That instinct wanting clarity is not unreasonable. Civic involvement is healthy. Transparency is healthy. But the story doesn't stop there. REIT members have also been invited to speak at meetings hosted by local conservative civic organizations, including chapters of the California Congress of Republicans and other Republican-aligned community groups in the region. These appearances don't make REIT an official arm of any party, but they do show that their message resonates strongly within conservative political circles locally. Their concerns also echo themes seen in broader national election integrity movements that emphasize skepticism toward ballot tabulation, voter rolls, and mail voting systems. That context matters because it helps us understand where the energy and audience for these concerns are coming from. And this is where the conversation shifts from local meetings to bigger ideas. The concerns raised by REIT tend to center around the concept of voter fraud, the belief that ballots may be counted inaccurately, mishandled, or processed in ways that could change results. For many people, this concern feels urgent and serious. It comes from a desire for fairness and accountability. But when we step back and look at evidence across states and election cycles, large-scale voter fraud is shown again and again to be extremely rare. Not impossible, but rare enough that it does not affect outcomes. So if fraud is statistically small, why is it driving so much attention? Because it feels like a direct threat to democracy itself. Now let's put that next to the idea of voter suppression. Voter suppression is not about fake ballots. It's about real people having a harder time casting one. It looks like limiting drop boxes, reducing early voting, tightening ID requirements, making mail ballots harder to use, creating confusion or friction that discourages participation. And here's the key difference. Voter fraud affects votes after they're cast. Voter suppression affects who gets to cast them in the first place. That's a fundamentally different kind of risk. Now bring Proposition 50 into this. Supporters say Proposition 50 is about increasing election security and restoring public trust. Critics say it introduces new hurdles that could make voting more complicated for many legitimate voters. And here's where the local impact becomes visible. When residents hear repeated concerns from groups like REIT about counting accuracy, it reinforces the narrative that we need tighter rules, stricter controls, and more oversight. But those controls don't stay abstract. They translate into real changes in how easy or hard it is for people in Temecula Valley to vote. That's where voter suppression becomes part of the conversation. Not because anyone intends harm, but because policies created to address fears of fraud often end up creating obstacles for voters. This is where two groups of well-meaning people begin talking past each other. One group says, we need to make absolutely sure the system can't be manipulated. The other says, we need to make absolutely sure the system doesn't push voters away. Both believe they are defending democracy. They just see different threats. History shows us something important here. Fear of voter fraud has often been used to justify rules that limit ballot access. And once those rules are in place, they are difficult to unwind. Stricter ID laws, fewer voting locations, reduced mail access. These measures rarely catch fraud because fraud wasn't widespread. But they do create friction for seniors, working families, people with disabilities, and communities already facing barriers. So when fraud becomes the dominant story, suppression can become the outcome. For Temecula Valley, this isn't theoretical. These are our neighbors speaking at meetings. These are our ballots, our polling places, our local conversations. And the real question becomes, what do we believe is the bigger risk right now? Ballots being counted wrong or voters being discouraged from participating? Because democracy doesn't begin with a machine. It begins with a person showing up to vote. Confidence in elections doesn't just come from tighter controls. It comes from clarity, understanding, and access, from explaining processes in plain language, from making sure voting feels straightforward and welcoming, not suspicious and complicated, from keeping the voter, not the fear, at the center of the conversation. Thanks for spending this time with me on Uncorking the Issues. I'm Grapevine, and we'll keep pouring clarity into Temecula Valley politics, one conversation at a time.